very welcome back. Now, after witnessing poverty, inequality and injustice while travelling the world, our next guest decided to set up a foundation to support a number of educational and humanitarian projects worldwide.
Joining us now is Calvin Sweeney, co-founder of the Scoop Foundation. Good morning, sir.
Morning.
Hi, Calvin.
You've had very little sleep because you were working last night very late.
Was.
Because your background, Calvin, is you're a DJ. You're a DJ by trade.
I am, yeah. I have several trades, but DJ be one of them.
And you were gigging until 4 o'clock this morning.
I was.
Well, you're very good to come in after a few hours sleep.
My goodness.
Tell us, because it's an incredible story that we'll get to Scoop and the foundation itself, but tell us about you, because I was reading up on you and I love the fact that you decided to travel the world straight after your leaving cert.
Yep.
And so you left Ireland the day after you're leaving and went to
Brazil.
And what happened on the first day?
I got robbed.
Day one.
Not a great start to your travels.
Day one of your world travels. But that didn't put you off. You kept going.
No, I should have learned from that, but yeah.
And you had a myriad of jobs in the 2 years when you were traveling the world.
Yeah. I worked on a fishing boat, banana farming, painting. I worked in a slaughterhouse, just everything, all sorts of stuff.
So you spent 2 years traveling the world.
Yeah.
And when did the notion of doing something in terms of what you were seeing on the streets where you were traveling, when did that come into your mind?
Well, that said, I've probably had about 80 jobs, each more pointless than the last, and I was kind of lost. So I guess the time was around 2008, 2009. I was going out with an occupational therapist, and she suggested that I get into social care. Yeah. She thought that I'd be suited to that kind of work. So I started off working with old people with dementia out in Blanche, and then moved into young people with emotional behavioural difficulties, and then moved into juvenile detention, and then I was working in the homeless sector and ended up in special ed. So I was in a special school in Cabra, and I loved the job, but it started to get a bit like Groundhog Day. You know, I wasn't kind of happy, and I wasn't really working out despite kind of being really happy.
Despite loving the job.
I love the kids, I love the staff, I love the families, but I needed something more. So myself and Andy, we set up the Scoop Foundation in 2009.
Is your brother?
Yeah. So basically, Andrew was traveling around Southeast Asia, and he came across an orphanage just outside Phnom Penh, and it was very basic. It was a classroom, it was a dormitory. So Andrew came back, and he couldn't shake the poverty that he'd seen. And in Cambodia, it's not a welfare state, so if you slip through the cracks, chances are you're going to stay in the cracks. So Andrew came back. He was good friends with a funk band, so we put on a gig and then a pub quiz and a poker tournament, and it just kind of snowballed from there. And
so that's where you started doing fundraisers effectively with gigs and club. Yeah. And then when did it take the next step? And were you involved at that point then with the gigs?
I was always on hand to give Andrew my worldly advice.
Yes, of course. Yes, of course, yeah.
But with me, like, I studied journalism in Ballyfermot, and I wanted to be a war photographer originally. So I thought I knew enough by the end of first year, so I dropped out and I went to Israel for the second Intifada. So I was in Palestine, in the West Bank, and in Bethlehem when the Palestinians took it over. And it was very violent, and I quickly realised that I didn't want to be a war photographer. I didn't want to take pictures of people under the people being so vulnerable. Yeah. So, you know, kind of figured out that I actually wanted to help people. So the Middle East was always in the back of my mind. So when the war broke out in Syria, and I was as horrified as anyone else watching how Assad was treating his people, simultaneously the rise of the Islamic State at the same time. So I just couldn't sleep at night. And I always promised myself that if anything ever presented itself like the Nazis in my lifetime, that I would get involved in the right way. So I turned to the Scoop. I said, look, either we're going in or I'm going in. What are we going to do? So
you said to your brother Andy?
Yeah. So
we're seeing devastating scenes of Syria at the moment, by the way.
Yeah.
Tell us about Scoop. The name, first of all, which I believe your mum came up with.
Yeah, my mum came up with it. It was support children out of poverty, and then it just started taking different things, like scabbing cash off our parents. And
got to start somewhere, right?
Yes,
Very
very
good.
But so yeah, initially we were working with children, but then we moved into Syria and Iraq, so we started to work with emergency services in Syria. We were running a psych program in IDP camp in Iraq. So we've moved from children to young adults, emergency services, different things like that. So we've dropped the supporting children out of poverty.
And what were you doing there, and what were you seeing?
Well, I was working with an organisation called the Kurdish Red Crescent. They set up in 2012, and they're the largest healthcare provider in northern Syria at the moment. So when I worked with them in April 2016, they were still in their infancy, just kind of finding their feet. And they were building a rescue service that was going to respond to civil unrest, car bombs, suicide bombs, and then it was tailing the Kurdish offensive on the Islamic State. So there was a lot of frontline work as well. So now they've become the biggest healthcare provider in northern Syria at the moment.
And you're also involved in projects in Ireland as well, though.
Yeah, well, I guess, you know, while we're off gallivanting trying to save the world, it's hard to ignore the problems on our own doorsteps. So,
and particularly the homelessness crisis.
Yeah. And I work in the homeless sector briefly myself. Sure, we all know what's going on there now. So there's an initiative called Street Smart, which is an initiative set up by Brian Cuddy, which works with the hospitality industry. So basically, there's about 35 participating restaurants. So you pay €2 at the end of your bill, and all the money gets collected and split between the homeless services. So Brian approached us to kind of collaborate and get to the next level. So we're absolutely delighted to be working with Street Smart as well.
Tell us about this funky symbol on the T-shirt.
There is meaning to that, is there?
Yeah, it's my friend Gianni he's got a company called Dolce Murda. He designed our Serious Vibes website, and I asked him to kind of come up with a logo, and it literally took him 4 minutes. He came back with this.
And that's it?
Yeah, so basically it's an S, it's a V, it's a child, it's a bomb. It's kind of, there's a lot going on in it.
Certainly.
And in terms of Scoop and projects that are current and what's coming up, where are you at the moment? What are you focusing on at the moment?
Well, we just set up something called the Scoop Crew. Basically, the backbone to any non-profit is regular donations, and you know, there's only so far you can go with fundraisers and favors. So you know, we're in dire need of regular donations. So we decided to kind of pull in favors from all our friends with small businesses. We're the official charity partner of Oktoberfest Ireland, so Scoop Crew members can go to Oktoberfest for free. So we've managed to rope in a lot of people to give something back, you know. So if people donate to us, they become a part of the crew, and then they get a few perks here.
I'd imagine you also need, again, the backbone of any charity organisation is the volunteers. You need bodies on the ground, don't you? You need feet on the ground.
Yeah, well, not necessarily over there, because we can't be taking people to Syria.
But you need people here to spread the message of the organisation and collect money and arrange events, etc.
Yeah, because we have an outstanding board of directors. We have a small group of volunteers that, you know, they give us dig-outs at all our events, and they're great. But yeah, of course, we just need more people to get involved. We don't get any government funding. And like, we're kind of in over our heads. Yeah. It's a good place to be. I'd rather be there than flapping around, you know. But
well, we put your
need funding and awareness.
Yeah, there's a lot of people depending on our work, you know. So
we have popped your website address up, and it'll be on our social media details as well. It's an incredible story. Keep up the good work, and thanks for coming in. Go and get some sleep.
Let's go home to bed now, I think, Cal.